Good morning. You see me smiling, right? And I usually smile, but more so today and now to share this with you. It's no more a crime. Attempting suicide is no more a crime in Malaysia. Thank you, that's great. I feel that way. For many years, as he's mentioned, I've been involved in mental health with a lot of others who are advocating and working for mental health in this country. And I think the message also applies to anybody, anywhere. Let me just give you a bit of the context. So I said it is decriminalized now in Malaysia, being the most recent country to decriminalize suicide attempts, of course. And there are 195 countries in the world. 20 more still have laws that make it illegal and punishable to attempt suicide. So we pray and we hope for them to change those laws. And it's crucial because it is coming at the end of the growth and the evolution of the way we look and understand about how to deal with mental health issues, and more specifically, how to deal with those who are feeling suicidal, so-called at the end of the line of mental health issues, right? So 20 more, but decriminalized, but nevertheless still important for us to think about it, because the basic point of my sharing this morning is that it continues. The thought about criminality of suicide continues. Now, so when I first started in advocacy against this with many other people, of course, in Malaysia, I was wondering, why would some act like wanting to attempt suicide be considered criminal? So the historical foundation for this, why it became criminalized in many places, are mainly these 3 points. First is the influence of religious and moral beliefs. So the basic point is life is sacred. It is sanctity, the sanctity of life that has to be honored. And so therefore, you do not take a life, including your own. So that then gets translated into countries that have a predominant religious belief into their legal systems, and therefore they criminalize the act of suicide. So it's meshed in and mixed up with the idea of sin, of immorality, and to stop it, they also use it as an illegal act. And the other, of course, we see in some places has been that it is an issue of about inheritance, about problems of inheritance or issues with inheritance. So some people, they say, would end their life so that they can manipulate in some way how and where the inheritance goes. So to prevent that also, they had created laws that illegalize or make it unacceptable to attempt suicide. And of course, the last one is often enough, it's an issue of public order. That means people think that a country must have certain order and people should not be taking their own lives. So as with that thinking then comes the idea that it should be criminalized as a deterrent. So if there is a law criminalizing the act, then people will not do it. That was the thinking. But in reality, that is never shown to be true. Meaning, the existence of a law that says it's crime to attempt suicide hasn't stopped people from attempting suicide, and actually many dying from it. To give it a little more context again, Malaysia, we are seeing anywhere between about 7 to 10 people who die by suicide every day. 7 to 10 people who die by suicide every day. And the research and the way of thinking about this, researchers say, how do we think about this and what the statistics show? For every one person who has died by suicide, there are about 20 others who would have attempted suicide. So you do the math on a day, how many people are attempting suicide in our country of 33 million people. And similar things we're seeing around the world in many, many places. and some places much higher. So we are somewhere maybe midway on the incidence of suicides. Yeah? But this is only from reported issues. And the criminality or criminalizing of suicide makes the reporting also inaccurate. But I'll come back to that in a moment. Yeah. So one of the things to really think about is how the act of decriminalizing has been fueled by or led by an evolving idea of what is mental health and how it should be thought about and what are people doing about it. So first is the shift from seeing suicide, mental health in general, but suicide as being something morally wrong, something illegal, to actually understanding it as a manifestation of someone in distress who is feeling hopeless and helpless and that sort of thing. So that is the kind of issue that we are actually facing and thinking about and seeing in our country and around the world. So the focus then has changed not to arrest, imprison, fine people, but it is more to help, to give various kinds of support, to create awareness and move towards prevention rather than any other kind of approach to it. Yeah. So the focus then is on the mental health, helping people rather than punishing. So the other one, absolutely not helpful at all. So what is the connection between maybe decriminalizing and destigmatizing? No? So if the act is considered a crime, then therefore it is a bad thing. So what is stigma about? It's about pointing and pressing on people a negative view of what is going on with them, right? So if it is right, if it is wrong, yeah, then people say all kinds of bad things to people who are going through this issue. But is it a crime? Just think about it. Is it a crime to feel depressed, to feel hopeless? Yeah, so that is the kind of thing that we really want to stay away from. So the stigma also is actually arising from a lack of understanding about suicide, about mental health, right? Any kind of stigma actually comes from ignorance rather than that. So one of the things that we do try and look and in our effort is to make people understand what is the background and what are the issues that are related to someone wanting to end their life. So we look at factors influencing suicidal behavior, risk factors. Yeah. So one of the barriers to it is that this, barriers to people getting help is the stigma. Yeah. So imagine someone wanting to go for help because they are feeling like they want to kill themselves. So what will happen is they will say, "Oh no, it is against the law. So that is a problem." Yeah. So then they would say, "No, I rather not say it. I rather not get the help that I need or want." Yeah. So that is a problem in itself also, a deterrent. So other kind of things is that, it is meant, criminalizing only puts fear in people. Yeah. So it deters people from helping or getting help rather than actually feeling that they could ask or reach out. So that was the problem. Yeah. So what is our role then? It is a role of promoting awareness, understanding to the general public and also to people who are going through that issue. So now you have a greater responsibility since you know this. You have to share. You have to tell people that it is not a crime. You should reach out if you're having mental health problems. You should get help. There are people who want to help. Yeah. So just to know that. Further, what are some of the main risk factors that we see? They say suicide is a complex issue, right? That makes someone come to that point. Yeah. So first of all is actually if someone has attempted suicide before, then the possibility of them actually taking their life later is higher. Yeah. So the other thing then is, of course, any kind of substance abuse, as in alcohol, drugs, etc. So what happens when that takes place? Just people's minds are no more stable and able to make good decisions. So then a little stress, a little distress can really push them off and then make them feel that as if they cannot take it anymore. And that's the bottom line of suicide and suicidality. People who come to a point that they feel totally hopeless, helpless, cannot deal with what they are going through and cannot. Yeah. So also then the last point really is about understanding that actually in many cases, people who attempt suicides already have mental health issues. So possibly some diagnosed and some discovered after the event when maybe researchers or investigators talk to the family. So it's likely that they already had some mental health problems, such as usually depression, anxiety, stress, schizophrenia, all the common things in bipolar disorder, etc. So what do we know from research? So the link between mental health and suicide is so strong that they say at least about 90% of those who actually attempted suicide and who have died by suicide have some mental health issues that led them to that point. Yeah. So none of them would be absolutely sure of wanting to die by suicide or to kill themselves. So that's why I say it's a very ambivalent act of someone being pushed to the edge. Only occasionally would we find maybe it's an immediate stressor, something that affected the person that they wanted to quickly do something about it, and they found no other way, and then the best way they can think about is to end their life. But most often enough, it is some other things that have led them to that point. So really need to capture that and understand that point. Now, what you see, the next point I'm going through may not immediately make sense. What is this about language and reality? So we have the issue that now it is decriminalized. But the point I'd like to make is that even though it is officially and in the legal system no more a crime, the mentality, the psyche of people of how they see suicide behavior will remain for a long time. Yeah. So the thinking here is that language influences our cognition and perception. So let me say that again. So the language influences our understanding and the way we perceive something. So to give an example of this, let's say if you talk about a group of people walking through the streets in Kuala Lumpur or anywhere else, with placards, etc. If I said they are troublemakers and rioters, then your whole view of them is different. The way you feel about them is different. The way you understand what they are doing is different. But if I said that they are demonstrators wanting to give voice to some issue or problem to improve the country, so then the whole view, perception of them or the reality that you see before you is different. This thinking about language and reality is from this guy called Ludwig Wittgenstein from long, long time ago, a language philosopher of language. So he studied this and he says this and he has a lot of research that backs it. But even in a common sense way, you can think about it and you see that it is a reality. The way that we see something, they say like Eskimos have like, I don't know how many now, I'm just going to throw a number, something like 10 different words for ice. And the different forms that they have in ice. We have ice, air batu, that's it, right? So ice or not ice. But they have, because their reality has so much more of different ways that they experience ice. Yeah? So what they might call different forms of the ice. So anyway, the point again here being is that language creates a reality, and it's an active force that affects our perception of the way that we see it and the way that we might believe in something or behave towards something. So it's quite common that certain words that long time already nobody would think of saying are still being used. So people are still calling someone who goes through mental health problems crazy. Yeah, families are telling their kids that who are having some mental health problems, you're crazy. Yeah. Gila. Okay. So, or mental, they would say, right? So those kind of things are no more in the language, but still being used. Then, the N word for the Americans, yeah? So there are some people who would still use that word in these parts and think that there is no issue or problem with it because it's got nothing to do with their reality. But that word, those words are heavily laden with connotations. That means what comes to mind when you think of that word. Yeah? So that's the idea or the issue about language. So if you see these quotes, I'm not going to read them out fully, but really it's emphasizing that point. If something comes into our reality, or the language creates that reality, it is going to be something that influences us. So the similar thing on the second quote then is about, even though the law has changed, the general population will still consider it, at the least, if it's not a criminal, but a bad act. And that will take a while to wipe away or to get out of the consciousness of the people. Yeah. So the fear or the problem with that is the way the general populace, general folks will deal with people who are going through mental health and who are seeking to end their life as the end stage of this mental trauma, distress, etc., instead of providing them help. For a long while, and this is not unique to this country and around the world, some research shows, doctors at emergency centers, when they see people who come in with what is obviously some form of attempt to take or to end their life, and I'm not going to go through the methods, they are very reluctant to state that it is a suicide attempt, even if they might say it. So why? Because they want to, in a sense, protect the family from further questioning, from further prosecution also by the authorities, right? So then what is the problem with that? They get treated, but then it's not recorded as an attempt related to suicide thinking. So what is the problem with that again, then you think? It is because then we don't have, the country doesn't have good statistics. Then we don't know how big it is. We don't know where it's happening and where to put and give resources of any sort. Yeah? So there's always a snowball effect on any of that kind of thing. So this actually was already happening in countries where it was no more criminal to attempt suicide. What am I referring to? The one where doctors were not, deeming it as suicide attempts. Just to be what I would say is misplaced compassion, thinking that they don't want the family to have the stigma that goes along with some family member having attempted suicide. Yeah? So you see how the language and how the reality is. Why? Because it is seen as something wrong, long time illegal, immoral. All of that is there. Yeah? Again, a little bit more proof on how it doesn't go out of the language and the reality. For a long while, the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, would not allow a proper burial of someone who died by suicide because they said it's like a mortal sin, a terrible thing. So they do not give them the last rite, the last prayers, and do not allow them to be even buried in a Christian cemetery. Yeah. So the thinking was it was so bad, such a great sin, etc. But that is long changed already, more than maybe 70 years over. The thinking has changed on that. The last stage when this happens, it is totally with compassion and empathy, and the person is given all the proper rights, etc., and allowed to be buried. Because it is seen as an act of a mind that has been troubled, distressed, not as someone who has done something so morally bad. But there are a lot of people who still think. In our hotline, I've heard and spoken to some people who think that, oh, if I did that, then I will not be able to bury it here or bury it there. It is the same in other religions, the way that the thinking has changed, but the mentality remains because the language is so strongly imprinted in their minds about how and what it is to be or to do such a thing. Yeah? So that it is wrong and moral. Even in Islam, I'm not an Islamic scholar of any sort, but they also take a very compassionate view towards people who are ending their life. No more that hard thing that, oh, this is dosa, sin, you'll go to hell. No more. Yeah? But a lot of people are still thinking that because, again, the language has created this impression or the perception of how it is and what it is to have done something like that. So basically then we are talking about, even though the legal system changes, that we need to still have some form of other things happening, various kinds of efforts, various kinds of awareness. Yeah. So the education is necessary, the education of friends, people you know. You don't have to give talks, but if you know this, then it maybe spreads by word of mouth, or in anything that you say or write or anywhere you may go. Then this will be the ways. Of course, we also talk about how media portrayals, the way that media writes about it, the way that it is shown in dramas, etc., will also affect this. So, basically, again, what is the key takeaway? That the language affects the way that we think and see the reality. It is now decriminalized, but the thinking of criminalization still not gone out of our psyche of the community. Yeah. And it has to be normalized so that conversations can go on. So when you are listening, in a way, you are now more responsible, or need to be more responsible. It said, with great knowledge comes great responsibility. Actually, it's something else, but yeah. So with that, you now know. So then now you are also responsible to be able to help in this promotion and understanding in a wider sense. And just to make it clear, we are saying that suicide is decriminalized. Suicide attempts are decriminalized. Doesn't mean we are saying it's okay, go ahead and attempt. Please, no. It's really saying, okay, please come forward and reach out. Right? So for each of you then, it's that message, and message I hope that you will carry away. Thank you.